11,000, or 0.8% difference. Finally, as we know, Denver's really a hot spot for millennials. In fact, Denver was ranked as the #1 metro for millennials who are looking to relocate. In addition, millennials are leading the way toward more equitable conditions. While only 18% of baby boomer women said that they make more money than their spouse or partner, 35% of millennial women said the same.
Last year, we referred to a 2019 Wall Street Journal article discussing the rise of college-educated women in the labor force. 2019 was the first year that women made up the majority of the college-educated labor force. Still, there's a major pay discrepancy between women with more advanced degrees than men. The plus side here is that this labor force majority will give women more earning potential and more control over their finances. The challenge remains getting there quickly, and unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic has thrown a wrench into many women's career paths as they figure out how to navigate working and having kids at home. According to a recent McKinsey study, female jobs are 19% more at risk than male jobs, simply because women are disproportionately affected and represented in sectors negatively affected by the crisis. Globally, an estimated 4.5% of women's jobs are at risk, compared with 3.8% of men's jobs. This is just given the industries that women and men participate in. Oops. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Here we go. Looking at this Wall Street Journal article that's entitled "Career Interrupted, Prolonged School Closures and a Lack of Affordable Childcare Has Made Working from Home Especially Challenging. Traditional gender roles have reared their ugly heads and women's careers often take a back seat when duty calls at home. Many women are reducing hours or exiting the workforce altogether just to keep it together during this pandemic. When we emerge from this, it will be interesting to see how the labor force looks and how many of those in the job market are women.
So 2020 is a pivotal election year, and it's also the 100-year anniversary of women's suffrage in the United States. Female representation in politics is moving in the right direction in both Colorado and the nation as a whole. In 1975, women made up just 8% of the nation's state legislatures. As of 2019, that number stands at 28.9%. Colorado really soars above that average, where women make up 47% of the legislature. That makes Colorado the state with the highest percentage of female representation, second only to Nevada. Colorado's been leading the way in women's representation since 1893, when it became the first ever state to give women the right to vote. It became the first state to seat women in legislature and one of only 3 states to include women in legislature before the turn of the 20th century. In January 2019, more women were voted into our legislature than ever before. Women comprise over half of our House representatives, making Colorado one of only 2 legislatures in the country where female lawmakers hold a majority. Women also make up a third of our senators. So what does all of that mean for public policy? Well, in 2019, Colorado signed an equal pay legislation into law after years of failed attempts. On this year's ballot is a paid medical and family leave initiative. This continued progress is a direct result of more women in the stronger representation in elected office. The momentum is really encouraging, and we're really excited to see how other critical issues will continue to be addressed in the future as women continue to make strides in political representation.
Denver ranked 4th on Magnify Money's list for best U.S. cities for working women in 2020. This was published ironically on March 12th, when this basically all started. Denver was 5th in 2019, so we moved up 1 spot. Still, we hold the same benefits: low unemployment for women as of March, high percentage of businesses owned by women, and high percentage of female state legislators. And the same shortcomings still remain: limited parental and pregnancy workplace state protection, higher percentage of earnings needed to pay for daycare, and the earnings gap between men and women.
And since we're here at Startup Week, we'd be remiss not to focus for a moment on the tech sector. Denver's a leading metro for tech employment growth. While the impacts of COVID have obviously been hard-hitting, Denver's tech industry has actually seen a significant rebound from May to June, where tech job postings in Denver jumped by 36%, which was the 4th highest increase in any major US city. And in the last 4 years, employment in Denver's tech industry has grown by 28%. Yet despite all of these really encouraging metrics, Denver actually ranks relatively low on smart assets, best city for women in tech list, at number 29 on a list of 60. And although we can certainly do better than that, it is encouraging to know that we rank higher than all of Denver's comparable cities, including Nashville, East Bay, Salt Lake City, and Raleigh. So where do we fall short on this list? According to the most recent metrics, women make 14% less than their male counterparts. In comparison, the pay gap was only 6% in Baltimore, which was the city that claimed the #1 spot this year. Women make up also only 23.4% of the workforce in Denver, compared to Baltimore's 32.6%. So I think everyone here can agree that we still have considerable progress to make. Surely, in a city where women make up 1 out of every 2 overall workers, Denver can do better.
Staying on the topic of tech, we looked at venture capital funding for female-founded companies in Denver. Last year, 7.4% of VC funding went to female-founded companies. Though down from 10% in 2018, it is up from 3% 5 years ago and 2% 10 years ago. Who are these female-founded companies? We shout out to Havenly. We have Christina, Havenly's CFO, on our panel today. How are we doing so far this year? 2.7% or 45 million of all VC funding deals in Colorado are going to female-founded companies. Though a difficult year to draw conclusions from, if recent change is any indicator of future momentum, we can expect these numbers to improve even more over the near term.
Awesome, thanks so much, Mandy. We're gonna start wrapping up our portion now. And I just wanted to close by saying that as a young person who's just entering the professional world, I'm really encouraged by the fact that this event is happening. We obviously still have a ways to go, but huge progress is being made. It's important to keep in mind that Denver as a whole needs to keep pushing, which is the only way that will ensure that our city remains a leader in all things diversity, inclusion, and equality.
Thank you, Isabella. As a final thought, and I ended this exact way a year ago, but I feel so strongly about the following words. Today, we stand on the shoulders of working women who fought battles to obtain equality in the workplace. We must not be complacent, nor should we rest until there is equal pay and opportunities for all. Reminder that we've only scratched the surface here. We've thrown a lot of stats and data and rankings at you. Though these can be overwhelming, they are critical to honestly assess our place as a city. Please reach out to us for more information. Our email addresses are up there on the screen for you. And now we'd like to turn it over to our colleague, Janessa, who will introduce our distinguished panel and discuss the real nature behind the day-to-day.
Great. Thank you to Isabella and Mandy. I see there's a few questions in the chat and Q&A, but we are going to try to save questions to the end, and we also put their emails up there if you have further questions. I'm excited to be moderating the panel, which will be continuing this conversation around data for women in the workforce, as well as focusing on the strategies these amazing women have been able to implement at their companies. As I mentioned, we will leave time for Q&A at the end. To begin the panel, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and their company, telling us a little bit about their company, what they do, and how many people they have, as well as share with us a fun fact, what they think Denver is doing well for women in the workforce, and what Denver can improve on to help women navigate the crisis. I'm going to ask to go in the order of my screen because that's how we do things on Zoom. So we'll start with Kerry to introduce herself, and then do Christina, and then Shannon.
Great, thanks, Janessa. Great to meet everybody who's joining us today. I'm with East Daley Capital. We are an early stage growing company located in Centennial, just outside of Denver. We're about 35 people and growing strong. We've continued to hire even since the pandemic started. And we're in the oil and gas sector. Specifically, our expertise is in midstream, a facet of the supply chain. We do data and analytics for all our constituents, from capital markets to commodity markets. So we help empower all of our clients along the ecosystem. As far as Denver, it's interesting. I'm a newbie. I'm an East Coast transplant as of almost my 3-year anniversary. And a big reason that I'm in this state is actually Denver Startup Week. So I think what Denver is doing really well is just having this as a mechanism to have conversations, to share stories, and to help each other out, the good, the bad, the ugly. I think for women in particular, you know, we help each other. We have a strong bond to help professionally and personally. I think Denver does have a diversity of company and thought leadership. And I'll tell you, I've lived in lots of areas professionally and personally, and Denver and the larger Colorado ecosystem is probably one of the strongest communities I've ever seen in terms of culture and helping others to thrive, not just survive. Since the start of the chaos that's ensued, I've seen several underground networking groups kind of pop up, and I mean underground of just people getting together and helping each other. I've seen veterans of industries help with resumes to job to mentorship. I've seen companies sharing resources, right, from back to school to opening the office to how you're dealing with providing flexibility. I think the one thing as I kind of reviewed what everybody's been doing and have been living it, that Denver can improve upon is being loud with our stories, both the struggles and the successes of individuals and companies. Sharing what's been going well, sharing what's not going well and how we change it, and then really being empathetic to everyone's struggle and how to navigate it. Nobody has the answers. We're in very uncharted territory. And the best way to get through this is to be talking and being loud. And, from the data that we've seen, raising up Denver's profile about how we're an exemplary ecosystem and helping all companies and individuals really navigate new territory.
Great, Christina.
Hi, everyone. So Janessa and team, first of all, thanks so much for organizing this panel. This is a really exciting topic, and I'm so glad to be part of it. So thanks for bringing us all together. My name's Christina Devito. I am the CFO and Chief Strategy Officer at Havenly. Havenly is a venture-backed, high-growth startup based here in Denver, which provides online interior design services. Our mission is to work with you to create beautiful homes and spaces that you love to be in. And we do that through our team of experienced interior designers that are located across the US and also globally. Including our design team, we're just about 400 people. In terms of what Denver's doing, Kerry really nailed all the points that I was going to cover today, and she said it probably better than I could have. But just to echo all of that, I completely agree. I'm also an East Coast transplant. It'll be 4 years for me this Thanksgiving. And what I have found, I've lived in a number of cities in the US, and what I found more in Denver than in other places I've lived in is really this belief that it is a thriving ecosystem of startup and growth companies, and we're all in it together, and we can all learn from each other, support each other, and root each other on. And I felt that more here than I had in other places. I think personally, I've seen more of my female friends and colleagues just come together to talk about what they're going through, both personally and professionally, amidst all of the challenges that this year has brought, to share learnings, tips and tricks, what's going well, but also to be honest about what's not going well, and how we can learn from each other and navigate through these times. And I think, like everything, sometimes just knowing that you aren't alone when things are going in difficult ways is help in and of itself. And I think there are ways that Denver has and can continue to support, especially its growing and new companies, be a city that attracts this talent and attracts the spirit of entrepreneurship, and really, rising tides lifts all ships. In that case, I think it's wonderful that Denver Startup Week is still going on as planned, even in this remote world. I think it's incredibly beneficial to this area and to the companies that are able to really participate and learn from each other. And I think more opportunities like this, even in a remote world, will continue to really benefit this ecosystem. And I'm sure everyone on this panel agrees that being in either formal or informal gatherings of folks that are in similar situations and navigating this together is incredibly helpful. And I found that every time I ask for help or ask for advice or ask just for an ear, that I'm able to get it in this environment. And I'm very grateful of that.
Great. Well, I'll go next. I'm Shannon Sissler. I am the Chief People Officer at Crocs, and I'm just beginning my 4th year with the organization. If you're not familiar with Crocs, we make fun, colorful shoes that are coming in really handy in the pandemic right now. And we've got about 5,000 employees that are based in over 20 countries, but we're still only an 18-year-old organization. So I like to say that we're a teenager, and sometimes we act like it, but we're growing up fast, and we're doing well right now. We are based in Broomfield, Colorado for our global headquarters. And I personally have lived in Colorado for over 35 years now. And something that I think we've done really well as a state is the word that comes to my mind is grace. I feel like people have really given each other a lot of support and grace that things are not going to go perfect right now. And I feel like people have been really understanding and just given people, flexibility to do things how they need to do. And that's something that I've seen, all throughout Colorado. And it's been really nice to see humankind come together that way. So that's something that I'm really pleased with. I think, in my role as a head of HR, one thing that I would love to see Colorado do better is we have a lot of employees that have families, right? And they've got people, kids in school. And one thing that's been interesting is all of the school systems have dealt with this differently, which is understandable because they might have different circumstances. But as an employer, trying to support all of our workforce that has everyone in all different districts and all different schedules for their kids has actually been quite challenging. So even just being able to go to one place and understand, this is what's happening for schools, who's in school, who's not in school, and what that's looking like so we can better support our employees would be something that I definitely would welcome.
Great. Well, thank you again for the three of you being on the panel. I'm excited for some of these questions that we have prepared. So the first question that I have is, can you start us off by telling us a little bit about what you're seeing in the current environment and how you're seeing people navigate these challenges? So Cristina, I'll have you kick us off with answering that one and then open it up to the rest of the panelists. I think you're still on mute. Sorry, it had to happen.
Thank you. Sorry. I'm seeing three big trends on my end. Firstly, now that companies have been weathering the COVID storm for most of 2020, which is a little hard to believe, but it's true. They're looking, and we are looking at what operating in this new norm really means. And this was true both at collective retreats where I was before Havenly, also a startup based here in Denver, and now at Havenly. And we're thinking about it both from the perspective of what the next 12 months will look like, but then as well as what life will look like after that. And we're trying to look at it both from a business lens in terms of how it will impact our business, our clients, our ways of working, as well as a human lens on the impact this will have on our team. And that brings me to kind of trend number two, and my next point, which is really just embracing that work from home life. Many companies have been reticent to adopt much of a remote business operation, at least in my experience, because of the impact that could have on things like company culture, team collaboration, business efficiency. And if there is a negative impact on any of these, then it could potentially lead to a negative impact on business performance. But in COVID times, we just have to make it work. And what that looks like, I think, looks differently for each business and sometimes even with each team within that business. At Havenly, we've invested in tools and customs that encourage and allows for culture building, even when we're not physically together and in the same space. So some of the things that we've been doing are hosting virtual coffee chats. We use an app called Donut for that. I think a lot of folks are familiar with it. We do bi-weekly all-team huddles, and we really use this as a way to not only reinforce and update on how the company's doing, review special projects and spotlight team members, but also to have a way for us to come together, have some fun, allow for a Q&A from our team so they can ask the questions of leadership. We use things like 15.5 for weekly employee feedback and for keeping a pulse check on our team. And we do things like virtual high fives and kudo boards and other fun things to celebrate birthdays, anniversaries, and other celebrations and successes. We do questionnaires to highlight new team members that have joined us, and we email that around through our HRIS platform. So we use a number of different kind of tools to promote that culture. We've also implemented a company culture crew, which is cross-departmental. to stay on top of the team and to help maintain our company culture and plan events for us as well, and really promote and keep top of mind what our qualities and values are as a business. And then I think the third thing that I've seen, and maybe the one positive coming out of all of this, is that it's really making us all a little more human and empathetic, especially in the workplace. And, you know, you don't need me to tell you that everyone's situation is different. We've all seen that, we all feel it. But it is okay to ask your team how they're doing on a personal level, no matter where you are in the company. And you know, I think it's important to realize that people are struggling in different ways, whether it be, you know, Shannon's calling out balancing now working from home with also having to work in a new educational environment for your children, whether that be your family is not nearby and perhaps you haven't seen them in a long time because of what's going on with COVID, or if you're just struggling with working remotely and not being around as many people as you're used to being. Everybody is going through something at this time. And I think what's important is to remember to take a step back and know that you are on and or are leading a team of humans who are dealing with real anxieties and stresses and concerns that go beyond work right now. And I think trying to be flexible and as understanding as you can be is important.
I'd add in that, you know, to your point, Christina, we've really embraced the change now. It's kind of like we kicked off the year, right? Everybody was in the midst of their new, a lot of folks in their fiscal year planning, right? You're towards the end of Q1, you're starting to really swim. I make lots of bad metaphors and analogies. And then all of a sudden this happened and everybody kind of just started to tread water, right? And just hold on because we thought that, you know, things would just be short term. And I think now we're embracing the change as more of this is the new norm. And so outside of, you know, in addition to just culture, not being just tolerant of this, we're embracing it. And that's also from a business standpoint as well, right? Like my sales team, we stopped traveling. We stopped having client meetings. There were no more conferences. My marketing killed all of that, right? We now see virtual conferences like this. We're doing virtual sales meetings, hiring. We kept treading water, but man, we went to a slow doggy paddle because we were nervous. We were nervous about what that experience would be. We were nervous about sight unseen, you know, and how we could navigate video interviews. And now we're full force doing, you know, Michael Phelps in the water, that we've kicked it back into high gear from every operational standpoint. And then the empathetic angle to it to our employees and how to best navigate that. You know, so I think that's another big change that has happened over the duration of the last several months. This is the new norm.
Well, Shannon, I'd like to direct the next question to you because we talked about humankind and the people component, which right up your alley is. So what are you and Crocs doing to help your employees navigate this environment, and how are you measuring your efforts? You know, we have the data at the beginning. We always like to put an emphasis on that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts there.
Absolutely. You know, at Crocs, we've got 3 distinct workforces. Our folks that are in corporate offices, people that are in retail stores, and also employees that are in our distribution centers. And I think it's really important to start with who are you serving and trying to support? And what we've learned is that all 3 of those workforces have very different needs that we've had to respond to. And, you know, if you think about someone working in a retail setting, they're dealing with customers every day. They might have lines at their doors they've never dealt with. They've got people coming in wearing masks, not wearing masks, touching everything. You know, how do you provide a good customer service experience in that situation versus warehouse workers that might be around a lot of people each day, touching equipment, and how do you keep them safe? And so I think it really starts with thinking about who are you trying to support and catering, you know, how you do things to support those people. And then the next part of your question was around how do you know how you're doing? And we're fortunate for a couple of years now, we've partnered with Glint. Glint is owned by LinkedIn and they're an employee listening tool. And, you know, we've gone out on a few different occasions since this pandemic started and just listened to our employees, what's working well, what's not working well. And, you know, I think there's a lot of companies that as we face this downturn are thinking, oh my gosh, engagement's going to go down, people are not going to be happy. And just like many organizations, we had to do hard things. We had to do furloughs and part-time hours and pay cuts for a short time period. Those are really hard. And yet when we've listened to our employees, our engagement is actually ticking up. And we started the pandemic in a top decile of engagement. So, I think what that proves to you is even during tough times, if you treat people, in a really positive way, but tell them the truth, the whole truth, right? So the best of your ability, this is what's going well. This is not what's going well. This is what we're doing about this. This is what we need from you. And you can really be transparent with your workforce. I think you can maintain engagement. And when you maintain engagement, what we've seen is that the discretionary effort of our workforce has really shined during this time period. And they've done an awesome job of stepping up to really contribute to the business success. So, we look forward to continuing to listen to what they say so that we can continue to better support them.
Christina and Kerry, anything that you would add that you're helping your employees do, or any measuring efforts that you're doing on your sides?
Really just echoing what Shannon's saying is listening to your employees is so critical right now. And I think that our people and culture team lead a lot of those efforts, but it comes down to all of leadership embracing that, making sure that it's top of mind and a priority, so that it's filtering across the whole organization. And just, again, being understanding and flexible of the team and what might be unique to their certain circumstance or situation is really important. And, at the end of the day, businesses measure many things, but team happiness and satisfaction is one thing that Havenly measures, and that basically every startup I've been at measures, because it is such an important driver of the culture, and it ultimately is an indicator of business performance as well. And so that is something that we keep top of mind, listening, being transparent, but understanding where the team is important to us. And it was true before now, and it's certainly more important now that we don't see each other day to day as much and aren't in the same room. So having that understanding is important.
Kerry, you mentioned in your opening sort of the networking and the ecosystem in Denver. What are, just sort of more broadly, what are you seeing companies do right during this time? And on the flip side, what are you seeing companies do wrong?
Yeah, so I think we've heard from Shannon at Crocs and Christina at Havenly. They've given a lot of examples of things that are going right. I think the term right, almost you can put that, italics around it, put it in italics, put quotes around it, because right keeps changing. Right is also depending on the time, the employee base, the different situations. You're hearing Shannon with a whole cohort of different employee situations, different types of jobs, and different challenges. I think some of the things that across the board, though, are universally right is being empathetic to everyone's situation. There are a lot of parents out there. Shannon mentioned and the different school systems, and Christina touched on it. You have each school district handling it differently. You have different days of the week, pickup times, drop-offs. That's a challenge. You have folks with different health conditions. We've had some, socially distanced meetings. We had some outside even, but there are silent health conditions that might not be so obvious, or maybe an employee doesn't want to disclose. How about new folks on the team starting remotely, those taking care of elderly, and a lot of silent issues that you might not see and might not be spoken about. So there are a lot of different situations. And I think the number one thing is one size does not fit all, to be empathetic to everybody's situation. And like we've been talking about, we're dealing with humans, and, we're blurring the lines, I think, more than we ever have with professional and personal. Your home becomes your work, your gym, your school, your playground. It's everything all wrapped in one. I think there are some keywords I kind of came up when thinking about this: flexible, right? Be flexible. Things might change over time. Listen. Shannon talked about listening a lot, taking precautions for those that might be compromised with health efforts. Giving back to the community. A lot of companies have ramped their social ability to give back. East Daley, my company, we started at the top of it. We took all of our travel funds for the quarter. We handed it to each employee in their check and said, spend it however you see best. It went from the takeout person, the dog walker, the restaurant, we had a whole slew of community service going on, and we enabled each employee to pick what they were most passionate about. We launched our community service program, cleaning up trails to making cards for healthcare workers in nursing homes. People like to help those that might not be in as fortunate position. And I've seen that across a lot of companies. Being open and honest with employees as well, I think is really key, and vice versa. Moreover, employees being really open and honest. So I wouldn't, just put it on leadership. I would encourage employees to also speak up. So back to listening leadership, it takes two to tango, and leaders don't always have the answers. I certainly don't. So I really ask my employees and ask them to speak up and give their opinions. I think some of the more tactical things as well is helping with home setups. I've seen companies give a stipend towards it. My company, we lent out everything, desk, chairs. I'm using a company desk and a company chair. Monitors went home. You saw hordes of it going down the elevator. Helping with days off, right? The new norm is out the door. 9 to 5 doesn't exist right now. Kids, need help. Parents need help. The world's kind of turned upside down. So companies that are remaining really flexible with paid time off, or not holding to the 9 to 5 schedule. And then I think what Christina and Shannon both touched on, the sense of community, those doing it really well. And that can come in a lot of forms, from donut and having coffee via an app, Zoom calls, go to meetings. We've had a lot of grassroots efforts by our staff. We did a golf outing, very socially distant in the open air. There's a lot of different efforts to keep that sense of company community and engagement. You're not alone, Christina said, and it's really true. Sometimes it really helps to understand what everybody's going through. Companies, that of course, there's the inverse of all of that. I think when I've seen it gone awry is communication wanes, and the empathy wanes with that as well. One size fits all, and holding to pre-COVID, we call it, PC and BC and AC, after COVID, before COVID, and it all went out the door, right? This is a new world. So, time off hours, working, ways of communication, it all needs to be examined. And I think being vulnerable, that's the biggest thing as well. And it starts with the most junior employee to the most senior employee, talking about what's going well, what's not going well, and really making a discussion and trying to come up with the best outcome, solution, situation possible. And when companies kind of stay rigid, I think these days, that's where things go awry.
Great, thank you. And I wanted to switch it, move directions a little bit and talk a little bit about what employees can do in order to progress their careers, despite what, we're all sort of talking about. There's a little bit of a pause here. And Shannon, maybe you can walk us through, what you're encouraging employees to do themselves. We have a lot of individuals on this call, not just companies. So like to look at both aspects to it.
Yeah, I have a few different thoughts around that, because I think employees are finding themselves in very different circumstances, right? First, I want to acknowledge that there are a lot of amazing people that are finding themselves not working right now. And I think what I want to tell those people is it will be okay. It might not feel like it in this moment, but it will be okay. And what I've seen for people that have really successfully navigated those situations is it might require more flexibility than you're used to. You might find yourself in an industry that's facing a significant downturn right now, whether I'll use an example of being in a restaurant industry or being in travel, or, any hoteling is a challenge, right? And what I would encourage people to think about is, how can you be flexible? And maybe you need to be flexible for the short term, or that's a longer term. And I think right now people might find themselves in what I would call an in the meantime job. Meaning this might not be your forever job, and that's okay. There's a lot of people that are going to find themselves in the meantime jobs for 2020 and 21. However, what I would encourage you to do is, what can you learn from that experience, right? How can you continue to better yourself, whether it's learning new skills, or maybe picking up some different educational opportunities on the side, or just, meeting a new network of people. How can you use this opportunity as a time to transition and make it through, right? for those of us that find ourselves in jobs, it's also a time of a lot of growth and the need to be flexible. I think, right now organizations need people to roll up their sleeves and do what they need to do to come together and survive and thrive. And that might mean that the role description that you were issued is not the role description we need for today. And there's a lot of people that are going to have to just pitch in however they need to. And I think it's really important to roll up your sleeves when asked and get creative, right? This is a time that you can see amazing things come out of organizations. I know, one thing we were fortunate to do at Crocs is we decided to take the initiative to give to shoes to frontline healthcare workers. And that was an idea that came from the organization. And within, I think it was less than 5 days, we went from, we're going to do, this is an idea to we're going to do this. And we ultimately gave away, $40 million of shoes. And we saw people everywhere from the e-commerce developers to the people in the warehouse to, the retail folks when they came back got to share in that success. And it really, I think, gained a lot of loyalty from our customers. And so those are things that we didn't go into 2020 thinking that was an opportunity. And yet so many people got to grow from that experience. So, take the opportunity to say, wow, I didn't plan for this, but maybe it's an amazing opportunity right now. So flexibility is the name of the game, and we just got to get through. That's what we all have to do. And that might mean taking on different responsibilities.
I think that I like the flexibility. Christina, Kerry, anything you would add on what you would like to see employees do, sort of professional advice tips for employees during this time?
I would go back to the word vulnerable, right? This is a time for growth. And, don't hesitate to ask for help. If you find yourself with new responsibilities and roles as an employee, say, I don't know it. Can you help me? I've never had to do this before. I'm struggling. Or I'd love to help with that opportunity. Can I chip in, even though it's out of the confines of my role? We're embracing this change. We're embracing things out of the norm. So speak up, be vulnerable. And if you're not, if you're in between things or looking for the next, women don't always ask for help, right? We carry the weight of the world. We have to be strong. We have to figure things out. We're very analytic. And it might not always be our strong suit to reach out to our community. And there are a lot of amazing folks in the Denver community that not only can help, but would love to, right? And so be open to saying, hey, could you help me with my resume? Or do you have any intros for me? Or do you know anybody that's hiring? Be open. You don't have to be that strong facade at every given point in time.
And Kerry, maybe I'll double click on that point. One moment. There's a question in the queue around how all the generations are experiencing this pandemic and how they might be experiencing it different. And I think your piece on vulnerability is really important. People don't know what you personally are going through unless you find their way to share. And the question in the queue was around Gen X. And I happen to be a Gen Xer. I have everything from a college student to a middle school to an elementary school child. But I also have an elderly parent who I've been able to see very infrequently in an assisted living care facility. And you might not know that about me as I'm talking about my 8-year-old who, is struggling with school right now, right? So I think you have to tell people, like, these are the circumstances I'm working with, or I'm trying to do this all by myself. I'm in my apartment all day by myself. That's a real struggle for my mental health. Can you help me? And I think having that vulnerability to, in a private, appropriate way, but say, this is what I need help with. And I think we as women can do an amazing job helping each other, but it starts with asking for help.
Great. So I'm going to end on my favorite question, which I asked last year and ended on, but I'm giving that sort of tidbit. So if people have questions, we have a few popping up here, but we'll ask one more question of the panelists, then try to get to some of the questions on Q&A. So my last question for each of the panelists is, what is one wish you have for working women today? Obviously, there's a lot of challenges going on. So maybe we'll do the reverse order. We'll start with Shannon and go back around the horn differently than we did introduction. So
yeah. My wish for women is to give yourself grace. It's okay. It's not going to be a perfect year. That went out the window, so let that go. And I think, like we often tell people around us, do the best you can. And I think for women, if you can really kind of leave this year, and for men too, doing the best you can, that's the wish that I have for everyone, and give yourself grace if that might not be what you've experienced in previous years.
Am I up? Okay.
Yes.
I have two, if I may, two wishes. So the first one is a little bit in line with what Kerry and Shannon have been talking about, and that's like, ask for what you want. So I think it took me a long time, personally speaking, in my career to get comfortable with asking for what I wanted. And I wish I started sooner, to be totally honest. And so I think for everyone, especially for women, don't be afraid to ask for what you want in your career, to create opportunities for yourself, to find people who are cheerleaders and supporters of yours as well to help get you there. And don't be worried if you hear no a bunch of times. Like, just find different ways to ask and find different people to ask it of, and eventually get to your yes. Some of the best advice always comes from mom, at least with my mom, and that is be confident and, become your own best heroine instead of your own worst enemy. And start by asking for what it is you want. And then the second one is, don't neglect in investing in your career. I think a lot of people, women in particular, and certainly myself, you fall in early on in your career into this belief of, if I just keep my head down and keep working hard, like all these opportunities will naturally come my way, and then I will achieve my 20-year goal. And I don't think that's how it tends to work. I think you do have to work hard, and you do have to prove yourself, and you do have to get those wins on the board. You do need to learn from your mistakes, but you also need to proactively invest in your career like you invest in all other things in your life. And that can come in a lot of different forms. But one that's like relatively easy to do and can be immediate is start by building your team. And a lot of people call it like your tribe, your group, or like whatever. I call it your team. And it's those women who you can learn from and who you can share your learnings with, who is that support network for you, because it helps in going after your big goals. Hence point number one. I mean, just sitting on this panel, for full disclosure, I've known Janessa and Kerry for a long time. I consider them part of my team for sure. I'm super excited to meet Shannon, and I'm hoping to recruit her onto my team too. But having that support network is really critical. And like I said, it helps to continue give you that the props that you need to go after what you want.
I would tack on, throw out preconceived notions. Preconceived notions could be what 2020 was supposed to be, what your next step in your career is going to be, that next growth area. My role as a woman, my role as a wife, my role as a mom, what my husband's role is, what my kids are supposed to do. Throw it out, right? Things have changed, and give yourself a break. It's kind of a hybrid of all of the discussion that we've been having here. It's okay that things aren't going to be perfect. It's okay that maybe your vision board or your fiscal year plan didn't go according to what you wanted. Your budget's upside down. Your initiatives didn't go. You didn't get to do the sweet 14er you really wanted to do because a snowstorm suddenly came up. It could be a plethora of different things. So throw out those preconceived notions, roles, generation, gender, responsibilities, personally and professionally, and create the new and embrace that. And that's really hard. Change is hard, but we've all united in finding ourselves that we all have to change. We all have to adapt. We're all in it together. As cliche as that sounds, it's very truthful with your tribe, your team, and really give yourself a break. We tend, I think, as women to be very hard on ourselves. And it's okay that everything's not going to go according to plan this year.
I think that's a good segue into one of our questions we have in our Q&A box, which is about how, I'm not going to read this straight up, but I'm going to adapt it a little bit, is if you are trying to pivot careers or land jobs, what are some advice that you all might have, whether it be generational, if you're a little bit older, a little bit younger, trying to pivot jobs or find a new job? Is there a good subsector of the technology industry or an industry that you all know about that's offering more opportunities? So what are some advice? I think there's a lot of job seekers, like we mentioned, a lot of people are out of work right now. What is the advice you would give someone looking for a job today?
I mean, and this answer I think sometimes gets old, but it really is about networking your way to the right opportunities. And sometimes I think people get scared by the word networking, right? And what does that look like, especially in a virtual world? But sometimes it starts with talking to your next door neighbor 6 feet apart over the fence saying, hey, I'm looking for someone to connect with about this type of an opportunity. Do you know someone? It's also, you know, as simple as going to LinkedIn and saying, hey, there's these people at this company that I want to talk to. Who do I know that knows people there? And could they get me an introductory conversation? And I think it's really, you know, it's reaching out and being overt. And quite frankly, I think right now people want to help each other. And so don't look at yourself as, you know, I'm an imposition on this person asking for help. People feel good when they help each other. And I think but that means you got to reach out and do the networking and say, hey, how can I find my way into this type of an opportunity?
I think there's certain sectors that are growing like wildfire, right? I mean, we're on Zoom right now. Zoom's exploded. Healthcare has exploded. There are a lot of industries that actually can't fill enough jobs. I'm looking for great salespeople in mine. They're all over the place. You know, look into new skill sets. Don't be afraid, you know, growth. If you don't know if that's the right move for you, there's lots of temporary jobs. Shannon touched on it earlier. You know, there are platforms, Moonlighting. A friend of mine has a platform called Moonlighting, and it's a lot of jobs at night, right? In off hours, experiment with things. I have a lot of folks who are taking classes, right? Galvanize class and 2U and tons of these academies offer opportunities to dabble in new things. I would also encourage everybody out there, and Christina kind of alluded to this, be bold, brag a bit. When you're looking for something, I look back at parts of my career not being confident enough, not taking the risk. I think statistically it's out there. Women don't ask for as much money. We don't leap for the opportunity. We sit there and think why we're not qualified for something. What's the harm in shooting for the moon? What happens if you land on it? So grow, try new things, swing for the fences. And lastly, I'd say ask for feedback. We try and give candidates feedback. Maybe the resume didn't strike the right chord with the qualifications. Maybe something went awry in the interview. You know, be bold about asking employers, why didn't I make that cut? And then embrace that and work for that for your next interview, that next change.
Yeah, I would say the same. So echoing everything that Kerry and Shannon are talking about, Havenly is also hiring right now. So we have some positions across the board. There are definitely companies that are looking to hire and fill positions right now. And I would also say, you know, I totally agree with the networking comment that Shannon made. And I'd also say, you know, sometimes it's just talking about it out loud in terms of what you want with friends or with colleagues or with family. They may come up with ideas that you don't have. And so you don't have to go into it necessarily knowing exactly how to move forward or what the path is. Sometimes you just need to have an open conversation, a little bit of a brainstorm with the people that you trust. I've had a number of those conversations with folks that are looking to either make a move or, you know, questioning kind of where they're at in their career. That stuff hasn't changed just because COVID has happened. It's just part of, you know, natural progression of developing as a professional, even this year. And you should still be having those conversations, even if you're not looking to make a move right now, even if you're 12 months out, start having the conversations now. And getting kind of advice and thoughts from people who know you, know the spaces that you're interested in, and can start to guide you with, you know, what do you need to do to get there, or who do you need to start building relationships with or talking to now. It's okay to, you know, start laying the groundwork really early, because you never know what's going to come up from those conversations or what opportunities you haven't even thought of might come your way.
I think those are all really great advice. I just want to be conscious of time. We only have a few minutes left. Is there anything any of the three of you wanted to say today that I didn't give you the opportunity to say? Just really quick before we wrap up, any final thoughts from any of the panelists? And I do apologize for the people we didn't have a chance to get to their questions. Anything else from the three panelists?
I think the only thing I would add is that while this is, a panel about her. I think there's been a lot of amazing men in this equation, especially this year, that are being excellent partners, whether it's at work or at home. And I think this does have to be a time where we come together and work together and redefine who's going to do what, both personally and professionally, and we're all going to get through it together. So I think that partnership is critical.
I would say on the networking theme, when I was a transplant and didn't know anybody here, I just reached out to anybody. More than ever, people are open to networking, right? We're virtual. Some people are fiending for new connections out there. One of the best things that I did upon landing in Colorado and Denver in particular was at Startup Week, anybody on a panel, anybody that I met and had a conversation with during a meetup room, I linked them in and I kept that connection and I tried to engage with them. I welcome anybody in the audience to connect with me. I'm happy to network in time to come. If I can be of help to you, please don't hesitate on LinkedIn to reach out to me.
Yeah, definitely echoing everything Kerry and Shannon said. And I'd also add too, I'm assuming folks that are in this panel are interested in startups in particular. Startups are moving really fast. They're managing many things. Even pre-COVID, that was always the case. And startups are always looking for incredible talent who care about that business, what it is that business is growing, and who can just roll up their sleeves and help. And if you see a company that you're really interested in, love what they're doing, and want to be part of it, even if there's not an open position posted, find the person that is in your industry or in kind of the swim lane that you'd want to be in, and just reach out to them. Because I can't tell you, I've done that before, first of all, when looking for opportunities, and folks have certainly done that with me. And it doesn't always work, but man, sometimes it really starts to uncover some really neat opportunities. So don't be afraid. The worst that you can hear is, no, we're not looking right now, but we'll keep your resume on file, and at least you've gotten in front of that person.
Great. Well, thank you again to all the panelists, and thank you to the audience for all the fantastic questions and engagement. I could spend hours talking about this, but unfortunately we only got an hour this year, so we're going to wrap it up. But as I mentioned at the start, this is a topic that's top of mind for everyone at JLL. We're committed to helping our clients, and in order to do so, we recruit and retain the best talent and talk about these issues with our clients. So I do hope everyone learned something today and had a good takeaway, and we hope to stay in touch. You saw all of our names, so feel free to reach out. Like the panelists said, please feel free to LinkedIn. And we do, again, thank everyone for the wonderful dialogue, and enjoy the rest of your Denver Startup Week. Thanks, everyone.